Klay thought a breakup headline would make Megan look reckless. The internet heard something else, a man accidentally filing a full cell phone in public. Because according to the story now racing across blogs, timelines, and gossip corners, Klay wanted sympathy for surviving Megan. But the details landing on social media are building a much uglier picture. The loudest detail is not even the cheating chatter. The loudest detail is image panic. And once image panic enters a celebrity breakup, every quote starts sounding like a confession wearing cologne. Start with the setup. Megan is rising again. New music is landing. Confidence is back. Public energy is swinging toward Megan. That timing matters because messy stories always arrive when momentum shifts. And suddenly a narrative appears that says Megan was too loud, too difficult, too dramatic, too wrapped up in trauma, too surrounded by security, too everything except convenient. Notice the pattern. Every accusation sounds less like relationship truth and more like a rescue mission for somebody's reputation. That is the first clue. When a story tries too hard to control the audience starts asking who feels danger. And danger is exactly what this looks like. Danger in vanity, ego, and public image. Because if the reports are accurate, Klay did not simply want distance from Megan. Klay wanted authorship. Klay wanted to write the ending. Klay wanted to leave the relationship looking reasonable while Megan looked exhausting. Klay wanted the breakup to read like self-preservation. But public reaction keeps dragging the spotlight back to one brutal question. If Megan was truly such a burden, why keep staying close enough for the story to turn ugly later? That question opens the real file. The hidden villain in this whole mess is not romance. The hidden villain is narrative engineering. Somebody appears desperate to control what the relationship means now that Megan is still standing, still charting, still culturally magnetic, and still impossible to reduce to an ex-girlfriend cautionary tale. That is why every detail matters. That is why every complaint now sounds bigger than gossip. Each complaint is a brick in a defense wall. Each brick says the same thing. Please do not judge Klay too hard. And every time that wall gets one brick taller, the internet notices the cracks getting wider. Look at one of the most revealing pieces floating through the conversation. According to the claims being repeated online, Megan leaned on Klay for emotional support when public lies and old wounds involving Tory Lanez resurfaced. Pause right there, because that single detail should have ended the sympathy campaign before the campaign even launched. Emotional support during trauma is not scandal. Emotional support during public humiliation is not a character flaw. Emotional support after a woman endures violence, ridicule, false narratives, and years of internet cruelty is not some outrageous burden. Emotional support is the bare minimum job description for a partner. Yet the complaint, as repeated publicly, almost frames Megan's pain as an inconvenience. And that tone changes everything. Because once pain gets recast as annoyance, the audience starts hearing a deeper message. The deeper message sounds like this. Megan was valuable when Megan looked glamorous, exciting, desired, and profitable to stand beside. Megan became inconvenient when Megan needed softness, patience, and emotional labor. That kind of complaint does not expose Megan. That kind of complaint exposes the limits of whoever is speaking. And public audiences are very good at catching that shift. Plenty of viewers can forgive a breakup. Plenty of viewers can forgive mismatched personalities. Viewers can forgive messy timing. Viewers do not easily forgive coldness dressed up as honesty. Then comes the second public landmine, the racial preference angle. According to the same circulating story, Klay's side allegedly wants everybody to know Klay has always been strongly drawn to white women and struggled with identity in black spaces. On paper, maybe somebody imagined that detail would create context. Online, that detail detonated on impact. Because the internet heard something far harsher. Megan was not a partner in Klay's heart. Megan was a credential in Klay's self-construction project. Megan was a bridge. Megan was a symbol. Megan was part of a performance. And once the audience suspects performance, every romantic memory starts looking rented. That is where the narrative becomes darker. Public chatter is no longer just debating whether Klay treated Megan badly. Public chatter is debating whether Klay used Megan as cultural camouflage. That is a devastating shift. Nobody wants romance to sound strategic. Nobody wants affection to sound market-tested. Nobody wants engagement rumors, exclusivity rumors, or relationship milestones to suddenly feel like branding exercises. Yet the more this public explanation expands, the more the explanation invites exactly that reading. Klay may have intended complexity. The internet translated exploitation. And that brings the conversation to another ugly contradiction. If attraction supposedly pulled elsewhere, if compatibility was supposedly weak, if Megan was supposedly overwhelming, if daily life was supposedly impossible, why drag the relationship forward long enough for resentment to ferment? Why allow closeness to continue while allegedly complaining behind closed doors? Why let public images of affection stack up while private narratives of dissatisfaction quietly collect interest? That gap between performance and grievance is where audiences smell manipulation. Healthy endings usually involve clarity. Murky endings full of retroactive criticism usually involve image cleanup. Image cleanup gets even more obvious in the security complaint. Reports say Klay struggled with Megan's lifestyle, entourage, and need for protection. But Megan is not a neighborhood hobbyist with a part-time following. Megan is a globally recognized artist with a real celebrity footprint, documented public scrutiny, and widely discussed reasons for caution. Security around fame is not a personality disorder. Security around a woman already thrust into public danger is not paranoia in the cartoonish sense being implied by some commentary. Security is logistics. Security is celebrity mathematics. Security is the cost of being seen by millions. Presenting that environment like some absurd burden again makes the speaker sound less truthful and more resentful. And resentment is the note humming underneath every report. Not grief, not heartbreak, not even simple disappointment. Resentment. Because the language attributed to Klay's side keeps circling back to the same emotional core. Megan should have been easier. Megan should have been quieter. Megan should have needed less. Megan should have adjusted more. Megan should have made the relationship smoother for Klay. That is not the language of tragic incompatibility. That is the language of somebody frustrated that another human being refused to collapse into convenience. Now, add the cheating allegations hanging over everything. No matter how fans sort through rumor and fact, one principle keeps surviving every version of the story. If somebody feels done, break the relationship cleanly. Leave. In the contract, exit with honesty. Public audiences are not demanding eternal devotion. Audiences are demanding baseline respect. And whenever a celebrity scandal features alleged betrayal plus a rushed narrative explaining why the betrayed person was difficult anyway, viewers almost always read the explanation as retroactive justification. Suddenly, the complaints sound less like truth and more like a legal brief for bad behavior. That is why the internet keeps circling back to self-esteem. Because a strong person usually leaves with directness. A weak person often wants backup options, emotional supply, public approval, and private escape routes all at once. A strong person says the relationship is over. A weak person stays close enough to keep benefits alive while sampling alternatives. A strong person owns choices. A weak person blames atmosphere, timing, pressure, trauma, attention, and every outside factor available. That reading may feel harsh, but that reading is exactly where public reaction is heading. The story landed, and instead of seeing a wronged man, many viewers saw an insecure man trying to put a luxury frame around selfish behavior. Watch how the audience keeps ranking the details. Nobody is really stuck on whether Megan is loud. Megan built a career on force, presence, swagger, humor, and command. Loud is not an insult in that ecosystem. Loud is part of the brand architecture. Nobody is shocked that Megan travels with security. Nobody is shocked that Megan carries psychological residue from highly public trauma. Nobody is shocked that Megan has a giant life requiring giant logistics. The detail shocking people is that a grown man allegedly looked at those realities and decided the smartest public defense was to mock the cost of loving a famous black woman through public fallout. That is why the internet is not buying the sales pitch. Another detail driving this story is the perceived mismatch between what Klay allegedly wanted and what Klay allegedly chose. Public reports imply Klay wanted access to Black cultural authenticity while also nursing preferences and frustrations that made genuine partnership with Megan unstable. That contradiction is explosive because contradictions always travel faster than plain scandal. Contradictions invite people to connect dots. Contradictions make every old photo look suspicious. Contradictions turn private tension into public thesis. And the thesis getting traction right now is brutal. Klay wanted proximity to Megan's shine without paying the emotional price of truly standing beside Megan when the shine came with smoke. Because think about the inversion happening in real time. A campaign that may have intended to expose Megan as chaotic has ended up reminding everyone that Megan survived public cruelty, public doubt, industry pressure, and private disappointment without losing star power. That is a terrible outcome for anybody attempting narrative control. Every attempt to brand Megan as too much only reinforces the size of Megan's world. Every attempt to frame Megan's needs as exhausting only reminds audiences how much Megan had to carry. Every attempt to separate Klay from blame only forces new questions about motives. This is not cleanup. This is gasoline. And Megan's name carries a second force in this moment: tribal loyalty. Fans do not simply consume celebrity drama like weather updates. Fans build emotional archives. Fans remember unfair draggings, smear campaigns, doubted tears, meme-iffied stories, and survival turned into discourse. Megan enters every news scandal with that emotional archive already attached. Anybody launching criticism toward Megan is not speaking into a vacuum. Anybody launching criticism toward Megan is stepping onto a battlefield with history attached. Forgetting that reality is a strategic error before the first quote even prints. That is why this backlash has teeth. Part of the reaction is about Megan. Part of the reaction is about a larger pattern people recognize in culture. A famous Black woman gets celebrated when a famous Black woman entertains, then gets penalized the second emotional complexity enters the room. Viewers are deeply familiar with that pattern. Viewers know how quickly confidence becomes arrogance in public framing. Viewers know how quickly boundaries become attitude. Viewers know how quickly trauma becomes baggage. So when Klay's alleged complaints mirror those broader cultural habits, the audience stops reading simple breakup drama and starts reading a case study in who gets grace. No wonder the music angle is boiling over. If Megan is indeed making art from the fallout, that choice terrifies anybody hoping silence would protect reputation. Songs move faster than statements. Bars move faster than anonymous quotes. Melody can flatten a whole PR plan before lunchtime. And if Megan transforms heartbreak, disrespect, or disappointment into records that people scream in clubs and cars, then the argument is already lost at a cultural level. Not because every lyric becomes legal evidence, because art usually becomes emotional evidence. Art tells audiences where pain landed. Art tells audiences who found language first. And that may explain why this whole story feels so rushed, so defensive, so oddly revealing. This does not read like a calm reflection after private closure. This reads like preemptive positioning before a bigger wave hits shore. Somebody appears worried about what Megan might say next, sing next, imply next, or inspire next. Somebody appears worried that Megan's version will become the version. Somebody appears worried that a woman once treated like an accessory is about to narrate the whole room from center stage. Panic leaks. Panic always leaks. And panic is leaking everywhere in this mess. Even the little details become loud under that light. Complaints about volume. Complaints about environment. Complaints about emotional needs. Complaints about race and attraction. Complaints about lifestyle scale. Each item alone might sound like ordinary incompatibility. Stack all the items together, and a different image appears. The stacked image is not flattering. The stacked image suggests a man frustrated that a relationship with Megan required maturity, security, backbone, and emotional range that maybe never fully existed. Instead of admitting incapacity, the public narrative seems to keep trying to relabel Megan as the problem. That move rarely works anymore, especially online. Audiences have spent years watching public men explain away women who outgrew them, challenged them, embarrassed them by succeeding, or refused to stay quiet after betrayal. The formula is old. The packaging changes. The audience recognition stays sharp. First comes distance. Then come whispers. Then come anonymous details. Then comes a portrait of the woman as difficult, erratic, demanding, cold, dramatic, loud, spoiled, unstable, or impossible. Meanwhile, the man hopes the public forgets the central event that made the narrative necessary. That central event in this case, according to the mess online, is not Megan's personality. The central event is alleged disrespect followed by alleged spin. That is where the story finally turns from gossip into lesson. Public relationships do not collapse only because of what happens in private. Public relationships collapse because somebody eventually mistakes the audience for fools. Audiences can debate evidence all day. Audiences can disagree on motives. Audiences can even split on guilt. But audiences know when a spin campaign sounds thinner than the facts surrounding the spin campaign. And the more Klay's side talks, the more many listeners hear a person telling on personal values without meaning to. No single insult damages Klay as much as the reported details already have. And where does that leave Klay? In the worst possible celebrity position, overexplained and underbelieved. Overexplained because too many details now sound curated. Underbelieved because the emotional math does not add up cleanly. If a public figure wants sympathy, the public must sense decency. If a public figure wants understanding, the public must sense fairness. If a public figure wants complexity, the public must sense humility. Right now, the reaction suggests many people sense none of the three. Instead, many people sense vanity, grievance, image management, and an astonishing lack of awareness about how cruel certain complaints would sound once attached to Megan's known history. That lack of awareness may become the defining clip from this entire scandal. Not the breakup, not the whispers about attraction, not even the cheating chatter. The defining clip may simply be this. When handed a chance to sound compassionate, somebody chose irritation. When handed a chance to sound mature, somebody chose excuses. When handed a chance to exit quietly, somebody chose a story that made Megan sound burdensome for needing what any wounded partner might need. Celebrity audiences forgive lust. Celebrity audiences forgive confusion. Celebrity audiences rarely forgive callousness toward visible pain. So the final read is simple. This was never just a breakup mess. This was a stress test of character under publicity. Megan's side of the cultural ledger already carried battle scars, survival, and comeback energy. Klay stepped into that ledger and, according to the current public narrative, tried to rearrange blame with details that should have stayed buried or been handled with grace. Instead of finding relief, Klay found scrutiny. Instead of dimming Megan, Klay spotlighted Megan. Instead of looking honest, Klay looked calculating. And instead of winning the narrative, Klay may have handed Megan the cleanest possible setup for the next record, the next caption, the next performance, and the next chapter. And that is the hidden villain nobody wanted to admit. Not lust, not timing, not fame, not even the alleged side pieces. The hidden villain is panic. Panic told somebody to speak. Panic told somebody to explain. Panic told somebody the audience would nod along to complaints about a traumatized superstar needing reassurance, security, and care. Panic lied. Public reaction is exposing the lie in real time. Because once panic grabs the microphone, the truth usually sneaks out sideways. And sideways truth is exactly what turned this celebrity breakup into a reputational pileup. So the next move matters. If more anonymous quotes keep landing, backlash grows. If more defensive context keeps appearing, suspicion grows. If Megan answers through music, cultural memory locks the whole thing in place. If silence takes over, most people will still remember the emotional shape of the scandal. Megan looked like a woman carrying weight. Klay looked like a man complaining about the weight after standing near Megan's light. In celebrity culture, emotional shape often matters more than courtroom detail. Emotional shape becomes the takeaway. Emotional shape becomes the meme. Emotional shape becomes the verdict fans repeat long after headlines cool. And the verdict forming right now sounds brutal. Megan was never too much for the right partner. Megan may have simply been too real, too visible, too powerful, and too complicated for the wrong one. Klay did not just walk into criticism. Klay may have manufactured criticism by underestimating how fast people recognize insecurity once insecurity starts talking. That is why this whole saga feels less like a breakup and more like a boomerang. Klay threw a story hoping Megan would wear the damage. The story curved, came back, and hit the thrower first. That is the mess. That is the pattern. That is why this scandal keeps getting louder instead of clearer. And once a scandal starts getting louder instead of clearer, one outcome usually follows. Somebody loses the microphone. Right now, that somebody looks like Klay. Meanwhile, Megan keeps gaining something more valuable than a clean image. Megan keeps gaining narrative gravity. Narrative gravity pulls attention, sympathy, debate, streams, and loyalty into the same orbit. Narrative gravity turns gossip into momentum. Narrative gravity makes every future lyric feel loaded before release day even arrives. If that momentum keeps building, this chapter will not be remembered as the moment Megan got embarrassed. This chapter will be remembered as the moment somebody underestimated Megan, underestimated the audience, and accidentally built the trailer for Megan's next victory lap.